it's the point about the House of Commons, in one sense, is that it was rebuilt when the Commons burnt down in 1834 at the height of our Victorian imperial power, and it was built to impress foreigners, and it built with this extraordinary high standards. But it's a 19th century building for the 21st century, with all the kind of quirks, oddities, pageantry of the 19th century still there, and some of the other conventions that go back another 500 years beyond that. So it's a strange place to be running as a legislature in the 21st century.
Martha, I just want to pick up on what Michael was saying there. He's talking about the building and the tradition, the pomp and ceremony. I mean, a lot of people say that's British culture. It's what people look to the UK for and quite enjoy. But is there a way that you can marry that with a more modern form of politics, particularly what our young stand-up be-counters are talking about there, and the way that MPs behave when they're debating important issues?
Yes, I don't think so. I mean, it's quite similar to law in some ways. You've got the pageantry and the ceremony there, and that works quite well because you want some distance between the people who you're judging and the judges. But it's quite at odds with the job of being an MP, where you're trying to engage the public and in a very direct way. I mean, why tweet and why tell people how much you like the Arctic Monkeys or Candy Crush Saga if you're then going to go into work and there's a sword peg in the cloakroom? I mean, I think there's something that needs to be resolved there.
What about Prime Minister's questions, which, again, it is fashionable. John Bercow says he doesn't like the way people behave. Those young stand-up counters said they didn't like it. On the other hand, you can only look at Twitter every week. There's a lot of visceral partisanship about it. Is it now becoming more of a liability than an asset, do you think? Well,
it's interesting. David Cameron says that every other leader around the world are very surprised that every week he goes into Prime Minister's question and MPs have a chance to ask the head of the government. So it is an important thing in a democracy to have that, with a Prime Minister going in every. On the other hand, the way it is carried out now, as we showed in the film, that a number of Tory MPs, or every Tory MP, gets sent an email with helpful questions.
Same with Labour.
Yes, exactly. With helpful questions to the Prime Minister. That's not what it should be, nor should it be the kind of Punch and Judy that it has become. And every leader of the opposition, every Prime Minister, has always said, I want to end Punch and Judy politics. And it lasts for about half an hour, and then they go back to it. That's their default setting. And so you have often questions which are stooge questions and answers which are stooge answers, in that they're pre-digested sound bites fed to the Prime Minister or the Leader of the Opposition by their spin doctors. If he asks this, you say this. And people get turned off by that.
It's quite interesting, isn't it? Because there are programmes on television. I mean, we do them here on Sky News, where we have MPs on debating the issues of the day, and that gets more viewers than PMQs may do. So is it not their responsibility? That's their prime time, if you like. That's their showcase to put across what they want to say without journalists like us testing them too much. Should they not revamp it and make it more accessible?
Perhaps they should, but I think the reason it's endured so long is actually Punch and Judy politics is quite fun to watch. Yes. It's quite rowdy. I actually find that much more engaging. They have much greater viewing figures than other parliamentary programmes. I think the trouble with this particular Punch and Judy show is that it's an Eton brand. Punch and Judy show, it's a public school boy, it's a sort of old boys club type of rowdiness. There's braying, there's kind of the honourable gentleman this, the honourable gentleman, and that's what turns people off, I think. It needs to be. I think politicians, female politicians, are perfectly able to handle themselves in a rowdy debate. It's just that particular kind of male heckling kind of Eton-y vibe, which is unappealing.
And your camera angles show this actually, if you're there, even rougher than it looks on the normal television.
Well, yes, I mean the normal television, the parliamentary television, there are many restrictions in what you can show, and it's also high-mounted cameras where we were on the floor of the House, so you could see the whites.
I mean, a lot of MPs have told me they can't actually hear what's being said until they go.
And the Prime Minister said the same to me, that he often couldn't hear the question, but he answered what he believed, from what he knew of the MPs standing up, the question was likely to be, if it was an opposition MP.
And Martha, what would be the main things that you would like to modernise about Parliament? And we saw it our stand-up be counters, raising quite a few issues, including, equality and transparency. What do you think would be the key things you'd modernise?
Well, I think in general those are very good places to start. I like the idea of electronic voting. I think there's a lot of late night voting that goes on in the House of Commons.
I mean, you do say that. Sorry to interrupt, but the MPs themselves say the thing about voting in person and going through the lobbies is that they do get a chance, say, to beard a minister, and they can do more business in 10 minutes in the division lobbies than they have the chance to do over the course of a week, because they can
sure, and
actually
you could
talk
make
together.
the electronic handheld devices only work when you're in the House of Commons amongst your peers, but in fact queuing for voting to vote takes 15 minutes each vote.
Well,
and
it has to be said, they've got electronic voting in the House of Representatives. It takes just as long. So I don't know. Anyway, we have to end it there. Thank you very much indeed.